and you're listening to Teacher Talk, an ETT Podcast production.
And you're listening to Teacher Talk, an ETT podcast. My name is Pav Wander, and I'm your co-host or your host for this episode today. And I am joined by Kendra Hatch, an elementary French immersion teacher in TDSB. And I'm very excited to talk to her today about her experiences as a French immersion teacher and a little bit more about the French immersion program. I am a non-French immersion teacher. I've never taught in a French immersion, a school that offers the French immersion program. So in many ways, I'm going to be learning a lot through this conversation today. And I know that many teachers across the system will benefit from learning a little bit more about the French immersion program. So welcome, Kendra. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here.
And so let's get right into it. So let's start by hearing a little bit about your journey into education and how you kind of got to where you are, and then tell us a little bit more about the French immersion program. So why is it so important? What benefits are there for the students that participate in it, and like just a little bit more so that those of us who don't know a lot about the program but would like to can get some of that information from you.
For sure. So I myself was a French immersion student growing up. That's how I learned French primarily. When I was in high school, I did an exchange to France where I could really immerse myself in the language, and that's how I became more fluent than I was from the program. It was also just such an amazing opportunity and experience. After that, I went to university and then decided I wanted to go to teachers college, and I kind of realized I have this asset, this skill, I should probably utilize that to my advantage. It took a little bit of time to kind of get back into the French. And then once I did, I kind of hit the ground running. I'm lucky in that I have taught in all the 3 different areas of French immersion or French programs in the Toronto District School Board. So there's extended French, which starts in grade 4, and it's about 50% of the school day that is in French, about 50% of the subjects, while maintaining the maths and the sciences in English. A lot of parents chose and really enjoyed that program because those heavy hitting subjects like math and science were still in English, so they felt that they could fully support their child at home. That program is being phased out in the TDSB just because of success rates and attrition over the years. And when they get to high school, they have to kind of merge and amalgamate with the early entry French immersion kids. And that was super challenging for those students to do just because of levels. So that program is being phased out. And I am now teaching in the middle immersion program, which is come in place of extended French. And it once again starts in grade 4, which is really cool because then the kids have had the opportunity to learn the basic foundations in English first, which, I mean, obviously not all learners in Toronto have English as their first language, but the vast majority or a larger majority are English. So having those those building blocks in English first really is ideal for them to learn before they then jump into another language. So middle immersion starts in grade 4, and it's 100% of the day. All subjects are in French. And it stays that way for grade 4 and grade 5, sometimes with specialty subjects or depending on prep providers available, there will be some English put in there, but majority is in French. And then starting in grade 6 in middle immersion, they get 1 period of English per day, kind of like what core French students would or English students would receive with core French.
As the flip. Right.
And then there's also the early entry French immersion, which now starts at JK. I've taught in that as well. I taught before when it was just SK. I taught SK French immersion, which was lovely, having the perks of kindergarten, but not the fresh into school kindies. It now starts in JK, which is awesome though too, to get them immersed as early as possible. And it is 100% French up until grade 3 or 4, I can't remember, when they start getting one English period a day.
Okay.
And then it starts to taper off a little bit. So by grade 5, which I also taught early entry French immersion, they were getting, I would say about 60% French and 40 English. When I was teaching grade 5, I taught math and French in French, and then I taught science and visual arts in English, and then English, obviously, in English. And they received
Right.
some of the other specialty subjects in French, some in English, depending on who was at the school that year.
Okay. That
Yeah,
sounds really, that's
yeah. So
very interesting. And so I know a little bit about the programs and, when they begin and such. Do you know maybe if sort of that middle immersion and then the early start, like if there's less of a gap when they sort of kind of reach the same milestones, like
yeah.
perhaps getting into grade 9 or so?
So I think they're still in the process of seeing, because it is a relatively new
Right.
program.
Yeah.
However, I've taught grade 5 extended French, and then I'm now teaching grade 5, 5, 6 this year, middle French immersion. And I do see a huge difference in the amount of French language that the kids have acquired,
Okay.
just because they are so fully immersed in the French in
Right.
grade 4 and grade 5. And even grade 6, they only have one period of English, right? So they definitely have acquired a lot more of the language, and I do see the advantages and probably the growth of being able to be at maybe on par or much closer than to the early entry kids by the time they get to high school. Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing to see how much they have. The grade 4 class at my school this year, so we're about halfway through the school year, they can already have full conversations in French with me in the halls, and they only just started learning French this year.
Wow, that's
Which is pretty,
amazing. That's
yeah,
really great. So the fluency is definitely one of the benefits of this program. And since you've seen this in all the different capacities that you have been in, do you see any other real benefits other than just the fluency in French? I mean, it is our second national language, so it's many government jobs. It is essential to have French as a fluency in French to be able to do that job. But have you seen or can you speak to any other benefits that students might have?
yeah. So obviously, as you said, like job opportunities and career opportunities would be the first and foremost, the things that are available to us. And even just like for me, going into teaching, knowing that I had this skill that I could take and use to my advantage is super important. Other than that, it really teaches students critical thinking and problem solving skills. It teaches them to take risks, right? Because they have to think outside the box. They have to be comfortable not necessarily knowing and understanding every single thing that is said to them, right?
Right.
Because I rarely speak in English in my classroom with them, and I'm aware that they don't completely understand everything, but it forces them to use those skills to figure out what I said or what was asked, or okay, maybe there was one word I didn't know there, but how can I figure out what that word should say? So it definitely creates more creative and flexible thinking among the kids. Um, yeah. Learning another language can also help with learning another language
Right.
after that, right? Because so many languages are connected. And once you know how and the skills you need to learn one, learning another makes it that much easier.
Hmm.
So it could also strengthen skills for the English language as well. So if eventually students don't succeed or decide that this program isn't for them, the skills that they've learned are going to be able to be used in
Right.
English language learning as well, because
Yeah.
they're techniques that are so similar, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The transferability of the skills that students learn with much more intentionality in the French program.
Yeah.
Many students don't pick up those patterns or those language rules when learning English because it is learned very much more. Like I guess organically through
Yeah.
conversation, television watching, listening,
Yeah.
and so participating in language instruction that's so much more intentional, I think
Yeah.
you're able to, as you said, learn many of those skills that would make learning another language so much easier. So it's
Definitely.
amazing.
And I think too, a lot of students, when they're learning in English, there's so little when they're learning some of those
Yeah.
foundational pieces that they don't necessarily remember how to use them by the time things get harder in the junior grades. Or, as you said, because it was second nature, they just kind of learned through doing at home or talking with their families. They didn't really have to think about how to acquire the skills
Right.
to decode and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this in French, starting another language kind of pushes them to relearn some of those skills, which then benefits their English language skills as well.
Right. A lot of important things there, a lot of benefits that you have talked about. But let's talk about what some of the challenges are. More so towards the instruction part of the French Immersion program. Now, you're very experienced in French Immersion, so surely you have experienced some of those obstacles and challenges that might be experienced within the French program. Can you speak to those a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, there are challenges that come with it. The probably largest challenge is availability of resources. Um, the board does their absolute best to get us what we need. It's just unfortunately not enough.
Hmm.
With English, you can pop online. I taught English for 1 year after being reorganized. And so seeing what I could just get by going online or going into the library and having a whole plethora of
Right.
options was crazy to me because I am often creating those myself. Um, a lot of the resources that we are provided by the board are meant for native speakers, and that's not the students in our classroom,
Right.
and that's super challenging for them. To Some of these sentence structures are not ways that these kids can
Right.
understand yet. So it's difficult to find books, especially at their level, like especially when it comes to middle immersion. They're
Mhm.
just starting, but they're not little. They're 10, 11 years old in grade 4 or 5. So I can't give them the books that are at their level
Right.
because they're little kid books and they don't want to read that. So finding those is quite challenging, or modifying what we have is basically what I end up doing. So we have, like, for the sciences and social studies, I have textbooks that I've received from the board, and they have some great content in them. With my early entry French immersion students, I once in a while would use them as supplementary because they were still a little challenging for those students, but they could get by because they were a little bit further along with their language skills. With these students, I will often take bits and pieces, or I will take the information from there and kind of recreate it into my own slides
Mhm.
so that it is broken down into vocabulary that the students will understand and into chunks for them so that it's not just an entire textbook page
Right.
that they then have to maneuver when they are just learning to read the language. So that is definitely the largest challenge. After that, probably um, parental support if they don't speak French,
Right.
which that is always one of the biggest concerns from parents when we have conversations and during parent teacher interviews is, well, how do I support them if I can't speak the language?
Mhm.
There's only so much that can be done, right? Like, certain kids that excel in languages are going to excel in the program whether their parents can support them or not. Um, and other resources are available, but it requires parents to have the ability to pay, like, for tutoring or something like that where someone can speak the language. Um, but just because parents don't speak French doesn't mean that they can't be successful. My parents don't speak any French, and here I am teaching it every day, right? So it's not a complete detriment. It just makes it harder
Right.
for kids.
Do you feel like there are ways that French immersion teachers can access parent-friendly resources or, sites or something? Like, is this again work that that you have to put into kind of creating those resources? Because I very recently learned that I believe there's only one learning coach for French in the entire system. And I could be wrong. So please, if somebody is fact checking that, please let me know if I
Let
am
us
wrong.
know.
But I just was very shocked to know that there's very little support for an entire program that is offered through the board. And I know that resources are dwindling in many capacities and in many different spaces.
Yeah.
But to create something from scratch every single time is extremely time consuming and often very financially consuming. And so, I mean, it's amazing that you do it. Would you say that the biggest challenge is accessing resources, or there just is a lack of them, or is it both?
Both. There is a certain amount of Quebecois resources available. However, I could not just take that and give that to my students because of the level and the differences in the language that they're learning versus native speakers, right? And then, yeah, definitely access as well. So both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, like I guess just there are some things available to parents, but it does fall onto me quite a bit to have things prepared. So all the slides that I make for lessons. So like I have several students right now who are struggling with math and with science, and so every single day, every single lesson that I do, I post it on our Google Classroom so that if parents want to go over with their kids at home or help them and support them, they're able to go access those
Right.
resources, those slides that I've created. And I've taken what I have found and made it into a way that the kids can understand. And basically, my advice to the parents is learn with your child. Like you took French at some point, maybe not a lot, but you do have some skills there too.
Mm-hmm.
If they grew up in Canada, I guess that is. And I just tell them, go learn with your child, because or research
Right.
in English
Yeah.
and find the equivalent, so that you know what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll have parents that are just have no idea. And so I will then try to give them something equivalent in English, which then creates an extra layer of work for me to then go find
Right.
it in English, because I didn't make it in English and then just translate it to French. I made it in French. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's quite a few challenges there to work through, and I hope that you've got like a good team of teachers that you can work with in your
Yeah.
space, and maybe even a network outside of the school that you can tap into as well.
Yeah. I have a great group of friends, old colleagues from my old school, and we all still kind of aren't connected. And when every once in a while, someone's like, "I'm teaching this new subject in French, and I've never taught it. Does anybody have any resources?" And we're all great at sharing, which is fantastic. I think it's kind of funny to see some of the difference between English teachers at because I'm in a dual track school right now, and I think
Okay.
because resources are so readily available, it's not quite as common practice. Like a couple times with English teachers, I've shared things. They're like, "You're just giving it to me?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" They're like, "But you spent so long making this, it's yours." And I was like, "Yeah, so use it." Take it, like,
That's right.
yeah, I don't mind. But I wonder if that is a little bit because we have to make so much that we're so willing to just be like,
Yeah.
"Yes, please,
And
don't
get it out
reinvent the
there,
wheel."
right? Like good instruction is good instruction. And so we should
Exactly.
be putting it out there. So that's
Yeah.
amazing that you're willing and able to do that.
Of course.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the stereotypes that might exist around students that are in French immersion programs. I think that there is a little bit of bias that exists within the French immersion, those that want their kids to be in French immersion, those that have certain expectations of what the French immersion program will bring them, or just misconceptions in general about the program. What can you share about that? Like how can we sort of talk to teachers and parents about what are the benefits that we're getting out of the program and how they are so beneficial for supporting diverse learners. Because I think that many people believe that French immersion is only for a group of learners that is going to excel in whatever they are given, no matter what. And so it can only be handled by a student that has a certain capacity for performance. And so, how can you speak about that? Like, how can you share about what the program can do for diverse learners?
For sure. I mean, yeah, there's definitely that stereotype, that misconception that is the case, that it's only meant for certain learners. I think a little bit of that roots to the fact that unfortunately we don't always have the support we need in French immersion programs. In like single track schools where it's only French immersion, typically you will have all those special education programs and resources available for the kids to support your learners. But I do find often in dual track schools that's a little bit harder to come by because there is a larger population of English learners.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to have the programs available for them. And then the French immersion students, unfortunately, don't always get that. So that could be a little bit of where that comes from. But it's not because the kids can't be successful in the program. If you think about an ELL learner, so an English language learner, they already have those skills necessary to learn another language because they already are learning another language in English. So let's say they were to come into French immersion instead, they could be at an advantage because they already have those skills to learn another language and to think outside the box and be creative thinkers that help them excel in the program.
Right.
It also puts them at kind of an even playing field with the other kids because everyone is coming in learning this new language. They're not walking into grade 6 in English where the kids are completely fluent and are able to speak and do this and that, but they are an English language learner and they can't, right? Whereas if, let's say, we walk into a middle immersion class, they're all learning. So it helps that even out the playing field.
Right.
But yeah, I think one thing to think about is students with learning challenges or language difficulties are going to have that whether it's in English or in French.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing that it comes down to is if the student wants to be here and wants to be in French. And many of my students that have had challenges or special needs in my classrooms, that's always the first question the parents ask. Should they be here? Should I take them out? And my response is always, do they want to be here? Are they happy? Do they want to be learning the French language? Because if they do, they're going to be as successful as they can be, or as they would be in English as well, right?
Right.
Those challenges are still going to be present for them, whether it's in English or French. Obviously, there are cases where that's not true, and the child would benefit from being in English, but it's no different, right? Like the kids can be successful in both ways. So I wouldn't say that it's only certain students that can be successful in the program. Obviously, areas that have more, like they're able to access more resources outside of school, they're going to be able to support their children. As I was talking about earlier, like if they need tutoring, that's expensive.
Right.
So having the means to do that is huge. And that could be a little bit too where this comes from, that if parents aren't willing to put in the work to learn alongside their child and support them how they can and do the work to find what they need to support their child, then it's going to fall to a monetary decision where they need to pay for something. So then it's going to be a certain person that's going to be able to afford that.
With those types of financial abilities to do so, which I think you're absolutely right, where a lot of this misconception might come from in regards to diverse learners. So yes, thank you for sharing that. From what I have seen from French immersion programs, I've seen a diverse population of students be very successful in these programs. And I think it's a fantastic as long as we can get the resources that we need to be able to support students, I think it's a fantastic program.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap up this amazing conversation where I've learned so much, what is something that you wish that teachers or parents or even students understood about the program that they may not know about the program itself, about the impact of the program on students that go through the program? What's something that you'd like, the one big thing that you'd like to share about the French Immersion program?
I think we've kind of touched on a few of these things little, but one thing that I think is super important for whether it's teachers or parents or other kids, even the smallest amount of effort helps, because let's say there's other teachers walking in the halls and they never take the time or effort to try to speak French or try to learn French. The kids aren't going to see the advantage and want to push themselves, because they're like, well, they're just speaking English to me, and so why would I put myself out there to try something new with them?
Yeah.
So even if, like, another teacher, if you're walking down the hall and you just want to say hello, it's easy enough to say bonjour, right? Like little tiny things like that, the small amounts of effort from home, from friends, from other teachers is super important, because then it really shows the students that what they're doing is important and it is awesome to learn something new, and others understand that too.
Right.
Right. And like it helps them to show that we're lifelong learners, right? Like it's so important to continue learning. And when we ourselves, which is the same in all education, but when we show them that we're still learning and it's okay to still be learning, and it makes it easier for them.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the probably biggest thing. And then collaboration, which
Yeah.
we've touched on a little bit, but
Right.
it is so important just with how busy it can be, making things and all that. I think it's super important for other teachers to know that even though I'm teaching in French and you're teaching in English, we're still teaching the same curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So the collaboration should still be happening, and it is huge, because then the students see the connection between themselves and the English
That's
students,
right.
and they understand that we're all learning the same thing, maybe in different languages. It just makes it more important for them because they see that consistency.
Yes, exactly. You made me think of another point that I wanted to bring up, which
For sure.
I totally had lost it in the process. You've been in the French immersion program for some time now. Have you noticed a decline in the number of teachers in French programs in general?
I haven't personally. Um, you hear about it
Yeah.
in the news. Um, Parents ask me about it if there's concerns. I haven't personally seen an issue. Yeah, it's a little bit harder to find a supply teacher to come in that speaks French, but typically French or schools with French immersion programs, I mean, which all schools do too, they build their repertoire of OTs that are coming in, and we have kind of our bank of ones that we know that speak French, and we reach out to them first when we need to be away. But I haven't seen a huge issue. Um, I haven't been in a school that has had an unfilled French position.
Okay.
I've heard of it,
Yeah.
but I haven't witnessed it myself.
If you could pass on one message to teachers that perhaps have their FSL qualifications but are reluctant about being pigeonholed, perhaps, would there be one piece of, like, just something to push them or to consider, like getting into the French, like in the event, like just like you, I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard a lot of stories about
Yeah.
unfilled French positions in schools. And there could be somebody out there that's hesitant to get into a French program just because they feel like, well, then I'm just always going to be forced to teach French for the rest of my career. Would you say that it's brought you happiness and joy in teaching, and that you're happy with
Yeah.
this role and this position?
Definitely. Like, I think what I would say is, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the struggles that we're facing as educators in French immersion are the same as the struggles that you're facing in English education. For example, I'm coaching a sport right now, and we have new rules right now that we're not allowed to put book tournaments on Mondays and Fridays because of the lack of occasional teachers right now.
Right.
And that's not just because I'm in French immersion, that's across the board.
Right.
So the issue is there regardless. The struggles that we're facing and the challenges we faced as educators are the same, whether it's in French or English. Obviously, there are some things that make French immersion teaching a little bit more challenging, but it's also so rewarding to see the kids learn and be able to all of a sudden have full-blown conversations with them in another language that they didn't know 3 months ago.
Right.
So rewarding, so heartwarming. And the kids that are in your class typically love it, because the kids who don't want to be in French immersion don't succeed in the end because they don't want to learn the language. So often they won't continue on. So the kids that are there enjoy coming to school. Obviously, there's always outliers, but it is a very rewarding and cool job. And being able to touch on some of the things that happen in our country, some of the festivals and that kind of stuff really gets the kids excited. Right now we're doing, it's called Mani Musicale. It's actually all over the world, I think. I think it's American created, but it's kind of to match like the March Madness that happens, but it's with French songs. And so it's bracket style where there's different French artists. Their songs are being released on a daily basis. And then the kids get to go online in March and vote for which one they think should move on. And seeing how excited the kids get about this kind of like international competition and listening to music in French and connecting with all sorts of different people from different places based on a language is such a cool experience to watch.
Wow. And I'm sure that they are really enjoying that process as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Kendra, thank you so much for enlightening me and all of our viewers and listeners about the French Immersion program and your experiences throughout the program in your career. We're so happy that you were able to join us today.
Happy to be here.
Amazing. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on Teacher Talk and ETT Podcast.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Teacher Talk, an ETT podcast production. We hope you enjoyed this insightful discussion. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us reach more educators like yourself. Don't forget to visit our website at ett.ca. There, you'll find additional information and resources from ETT. The ideas and opinions shared on this podcast are our own and do not represent the viewpoint of any organization. We aim to provide a platform for open dialogue and thought-provoking conversations. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover or any questions you'd like us to address in future episodes, feel free to reach out to us on social media or email teachertalk@ett.on.ca. We love hearing from our community. Teacher Talk is a Chey&Pav Educational Services production, where we strive to bring you the best educational production and professional development. You can connect with us at cheyandpav.com for all your podcasting needs. Until next time, keep inspiring, keep teaching, and keep making a difference in the lives of your students.